So, Philip, thank you so much for coming on to Startup Steroid today. I'm looking forward to this conversation because I know you have a ton of life lessons that we're going to dig into, we're going to learn from. And just by way of introduction, I know I love your moniker. You call yourself the broke angel. I think that's a really sort of catchy moniker and name that people I think can really relate to. So I'm hoping to learn how you sort of got that moniker and how you advise founders. And also you have a podcast called the Savvy Founder based on your background. And that podcast will sort of talk about some of the stories and lessons that you've shared on that podcast as well. But before we get into any of the specific questions I have, I want to give you 2 minutes to introduce yourself and tell us about your background.
Oh boy. Well, thank you. Great to be here, Deval. Yes, Philip Topham, the Savvy Founder, Armchair Sociologist, and Broke Angel, and a few other things. I describe myself as a serial specialist, meaning I've had lots of different careers out throughout my life. Everything from starting careers, biological sciences pre-med and network engineer, but then leading into joining corporate America with a large corporation and starting as a network engineer and leaving as divisional CIO and in charge of $5 million of operating budget and way more for computer capital. If it had an electron, I was in charge of it. And then getting recruited, and so that was in the manufacturing, vitamin supplement industry, and then getting recruited to the healthcare industry with a company that got 20 million VC funding to become the next big .com, and they even had the proverbial building at the side of the freeway with a big sign, and I could tell you what happens when doctors get $20 million, and it was a very wild ride. Moved computer rooms, moved offices, expanded people, shut down divisions, and went back, all sorts of crazy things. So that's healthcare, claims processing. I can tell you so much about that industry too. It's not like manufacturing. Then got into sort of the boutique pharmaceutical market research companies where they had some technology they wanted to build out. And so I stepped into more of a managing director CTO role where I took some technology, built it from 0 to about 2 million in sales, sold 5 million to big pharma companies. Very profitable business. But despite all that, did not have an exit, or I used to say it had no exit. But last year or this year, they sold for 26 million, and through some fluke of the cap table, I still had some equity, and I walked away with 32,000. So very interesting process. I also started my other startup where it was food industry and food labels and food regulations, software as service, got that all the way to MVP, and then had a founder issue where looked over my shoulder, and the founder with all the industry expertise decided that they didn't want to be in that business, and that business got shut down. Now I'm out. Now I'm at the UCI ecosystem, and I provide advisory services both through my private practice as the Savvy Founder, and then through the SBDC and all the other volunteer activities that I do. So corporate to startup and all over the place.
Wow. So I love that background and so many interesting experiences you had. Tell us a little bit more about the claims processing company. Sounds like a really interesting business, and tell me about the initial vision you had, the company was going after, and how you sort of progressed through that company.
For which business? For the pharmaceutical market research company?
Yep.
Yeah. So there was a consulting company that had gotten a project where they needed to find what were called experts. And they had met somebody in the research department that said, hey, there's some technology you might be able to use, and they knew zip about it. So it was one of those where conversations led to more conversations, and I joined that organization to turn what would be a labor business and teach them how to build for them a technology business. And it was literally taking tons of data, early stages of machine learning and AI, text mining, and trying to build a model that would prove what we need to do. And I'm so jealous of the tools that are available today. At that point, we had to spend a year collecting data and cleaning data and building the model. Spent a year with customers validating the model was really, really true and valuable. And then the next year, blowing it out and selling it to lots of other people. Very successful, as I said. And that technology and that approach is still used to this day. And pretty proud of that. I ended up with some patents and peer review publications in social network analytics and the mathematics behind it. So, yeah.
That's fantastic. Fantastic. And the other experience that you highlighted, a company that you were sort of part of to help develop the product, but the company exited for 26 million, but you got a very, very small check out of that. Can you share the story? I don't want to push it.
Yeah. I can share that. Yeah, that same business. I can only share that. Yes, they eventually, the technology that I built and the company that I built got exited for 7 figures, and I had a very tiny exit, a low 5-figure exit because I was still part of a cap table somewhere, someplace. But the company had some issues in the way they were structured. I'm not really, able to say fully, in a public format what those issues were, but it set them back, and I exited the business at that time. But yeah, the technology I built continued to live on. They were able to, rise out of the ashes and continue forward.
That's amazing. And see, these are the types of experiences that founders have no idea and have no experience with, and the knowledge that you can bring to a startup. So having said that, let's talk about UCI and what you've been doing more recently. What's that first, for people who are not familiar with the UCI ecosystem and the code, tell us about the ecosystem and what it entails, and then we can talk about your role within that ecosystem.
Yeah, Orange County has always lacked for a center. It's euphemistically called 38 cities in search of a downtown. UCI decided to create a innovation center, and Richard Sudik was the first chief innovation officer, I think his title was, and they had what was called the Cove. And it was literally a office buildings in the research park of UCI for entrepreneurship. So half of the staff was the old technology transfer process, but reimagined to help students, faculty create businesses or use that technology to transfer, as well as then for private people associated with UCI alumni, even the public when it first launched. It's now a huge facility. It got moved into its own big facility with events and event planning. Lots of co-working opportunities, events, biotech. They even now have their own investor fund, the Cove Fund. I think they're on Cove Fund 3, I think, is just starting. And it's now, though, they're focused really just on the UCI, the UC, the entire University of California affiliates. Unfortunately, it's no longer available to non-UC system people, but that's easy to get around. So anybody wants to get into that system, just take an extended, a continuing education course and get a student ID, and now now you can apply to the accelerator that they have. Yeah,
and I know they're doing some phenomenal work. I've attended many of their events and really enjoy what they do there. So now let's go talk about your role in that ecosystem, how you sort of advise the founders and the startups.
Yeah, so I got involved. I've been involved in it many times, even from when I was doing the pharmaceutical market research. I was attending events there, but I decided to build a business that was food labels, food label regulations, and I was attending an organization called 1 Million Cups and learning about what was going on. And as I'm sitting in the audience and hearing the questions people ask, I'm going, I know the answer. So, so I found myself volunteering more in that organization. And then eventually for a few years, I was one of the MCs for the 1 Million Cups. And that was a group where new founders could present their ideas to a mastermind. We started with about 40 people in the every Wednesday morning at 8 a.m. and built the organization up to 90. And then, of course, when COVID hit, I exited. I wasn't really able to do the timing that they were doing. Part of that, and then I got asked to help out with the Small Business Development Center, which is your government funds to provide no-cost consulting to startups. I'm part of that organization as well, and then lastly, I have a private practice that does the more active coaching and consulting for companies as well.
Fantastic. So how does the government-supported consulting work? Because that is a new area to me. How do startups apply to it? What kind of screening process do they have to go through? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes. Let's see what I can say. That the historically, the Orange County Inland Empire has had three locations dedicated to tech startups. UCI is now just in the process of piloting call it a pre-accelerator program. So an accelerator program without funding, we're just providing advice. So those companies that may have applied to accelerators and got rejected and didn't understand why, they're just in revenues or just have traction, they can apply for the accelerator and get no cost government advice from people like myself that we're all experienced either investors or entrepreneurs providing pitch deck advice, go-to-market advice. There's no cost, but there's limitations to what the government doesn't give unlimited to people. It gets rationed because it's your public dollars.
Right.
But it's a great program for people that just are stuck.
Right. No, absolutely. Is there a website? You can provide the link, and I'll be happy to link it in the.
Yeah, I can provide the link later for you. I don't recall it off the top of my head because they just changed it.
No, so absolutely. For listeners, it'll be in the description. So look down there, and we'll get you the resources. Now let's talk about your personal practice and how you sort of like to help founders and startups. What do you generally look for in the companies that you work with?
Very good question. So so I have a philosophy. I call it the FAST framework. Silicon Valley really focuses on the tools and techniques, the lean business canvas, the customer discovery, and there's a gazillion YouTube videos about that kind of stuff. But the thing that they really don't talk about is the lonely journey that the founder goes through. You have this brilliant idea, but you can't really voice the idea that, hey, I have doubts. I have this imposter syndrome. Should I be talking to the people? They're smarter than me. And those are really important things. So I look for founders that have the technical capabilities to, maybe technical skills, but they're missing some of those soft skills and missing that validation of the fortitude. And so the FAST model starts with having founders learn to have the focus and fortitude to accelerate their social soft skills and build their social network so they can implement the tools and tactics. And so I focus on the other two. Those are the two pieces I call the hidden dimensions of the lean business canvas. The canvas is the mechanic part, but how do you deal with a staff person who's crying because they have an issue, right? That's total management, people management issue. And that happens as founder issues, right? And you're thinking, you're worried about, how do I go to the investor presentation and I've got somebody in my office crying because something didn't work. Those are where they need help.
Right. No, absolutely. So are you, when we're talking about this framework, is it specific industries that you like to apply it to? Is it, more tech businesses versus, any other industry type?
So very good question. So we're in the 21st century, and every company now has to be a tech company somehow. So
Right.
So those companies that are really trying to leverage technology in a business model way that they've not done before, I consider a tech company. So I do include those traditional companies that are embracing the new technologies to create a new business model. There are also some companies that I help with their businesses, but I also help the ones that are starting with a blank slate piece of paper and doing that true high-tech, high-growth, scalable businesses. And
Right.
and that I have a passion to help more of the technical founders, because they tend to, I'm a technical guy and I'm very comfortable talking to people. I'm not an introvert anymore. There was a point in time where I'd be afraid to speak on stage. I have none of that problem anymore. So yeah.
That's great. Yeah, and this is the problem with the introvert founders, especially in technology, right? We see this quite a bit. They need to learn all of these softer skills, working with people, working with employees, working with customers. All of those skills are brand new to them. That's a really interesting aspect of the journey that a lot of founders don't necessarily focus on.
Yeah, I'll give your audience a tip. So anybody that's a technical founder, listen to this. I give you permission to use your big, smart brain to think about people. And you're laughing a little bit, but technical founders sit in front of the computer coding or building, a 3D model or 3D engineering, or they're physicists or something like that. And they have all the capacity to understand stuff. Nobody has just told them, you're not spending any time thinking about people. And as soon as they do, they suddenly realize that there's a huge world of opportunity for them to engage and build things in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. And that also gets you out of your little bubble that you're in, right? When you're in front of a screen just coding, you tend to develop this bubble around you, which, no one can really get through, and no one can really give you advice or guidance on what to build next and what problems to fix first. So that's really important advice. Thank you so much for giving the audience that permission. Having said that, there are a lot of other sides of the business. So you mentioned the 2 Fs. Is there more? Are there other aspects that you like to focus on?
Yeah. So the soft skills, there's in that category, as an armchair sociologist, I studied networks and social influence and social relationships and sales and all sorts of stuff. And the free thing every founder can do here. So here's another tip. The free thing every founder can do is learn to build their network. Learn by building your network. You're not networking, you're net worthing. You're increasing your worth of your business by the people that you speak to. And if you do that with a good strategy, then it can be extremely effective, and it's free. It just takes a little bit of time. You don't need a lot of money to do it. You don't need a massive website to do those kinds of things.
Absolutely. That's a great tip. And another reason why people should get out of that bubble and, meet other people. I think that's a great saying, networking equals net worthing. We should make t-shirts out of that.
Sure. That's the right royalties here. In fact, I'm going to be going on Etsy right now and finding a printing manufacturer.
There we go. So this is fantastic. So I'm going to ask you the same final question in a second, but I want to open it up to you. you have tons of experiences, tons of advice to share with the founders. Any sort of thing that you'd advise the founders out there to do besides the stuff we've already spoken about? Because I want to give you sort of an open forum for a minute.
Yes, my basic advice, and there's a reason why on my Savvy Founder there's a path on my logo,
Mm-hmm.
and that is because every founder is on their own journey. If you suddenly decide to compare your own journey to somebody else's, you've lost. Because you'll get jealous, all the other human foibles will come into play, and you'll suddenly start questioning yourself. Your journey is your own journey, and your experiences are invaluable and never are priceless. Nobody else can have them. So don't judge yourself by somebody else's journey. So when you're sitting next to that traffic light and you're driving the 2010 or 2006 beat up, pick on Nissan Altima, because I drove that for many years, and a Lamborghini pulls up next to you, you shouldn't beat yourself up just because the person next to you has a Lamborghini. It has no bearing on your own personal success. Just pick yourself up, focus on the future, and go forward.
That's fantastic. Great advice. Great advice for founders. So here's the last question that I ask every investor that comes on. And that is, what is the one action step that you would recommend to founders out there? Now, this is one thing that they have to do, before they get in touch with you, before they give you that first call or send you that first email. What is one thing that you look for without which you're not moving ahead with the company?
They absolutely have to have clarity on the problem they're solving and the direction they're going. That's if they cannot articulate the problem and the direction they're going, then there's nothing I can ever do to help them.
So let's talk about that a little bit more, because this is such a basic thing, right? That it should be a no-brainer. It should be second nature to most founders out there. But when you say direction that they're going in, tell me a little bit more about what you'd like to see in that.
Yeah, so I'm going to use an analogy. We always talk about trying to figure out right from wrong, good from bad, black from white. Those are two ends of the ruler. If I'm standing on a ruler and I say, I'm going to the white end of the ruler, then I know exactly the direction I'm going. I don't know where. I know maybe I'm too much in the gray and I need to be more white, but at least I know the direction I'm going. But if you're standing on the ruler and you don't know whether you're going to the white end or the black end, then that's a really bad situation. Right. So for me, that's why, again, that path, that journey, if you know the direction you're going and what's important to you and what's important to the business that you're building, then you have clarity, and everything else is sort of mechanical. But if you don't have that clarity of what you're which direction you're going, then there's not much I can do. You have to have the ability to move forward. Even when it looks like you're being pushed backwards, because you got to always stare at the light at the end of the tunnel, and know you're walking into the light and not back to the dark end of the ruler. So that's an analogy I use, and it's sort of a little Zen philosophical, but it's very it's a key thing that I look for in founders. And if they fight over it with the co-founders, that's a huge red flag.
Yep. No, absolutely. I completely understand what you're saying. And that sort of having that end result in mind, I think is a fantastic thing. You said, the white end of the ruler, that end point in mind, I think is very important for a founder or a founding team or even a management team in a business to have.
And it's I say it very glibly, but it's a hard thing to do, because it includes knowing yourself. It includes knowing your values, your ethics, your purpose, a lot of things. And that's something I don't see Silicon Valley talk about at all.
Yeah.
They talk about what's my return on investment, and it really should be what's my return on effort, and because the founders are giving their all, and if they're giving their all, then we should be giving their all, our all too, to help them.
Yep, absolutely. And I think this is such an important point. One thing that I want to get your perspective on is that end goal. I've heard some founders say that it's to make money, and that always sort of, that's a cringeworthy moment for me in a conversation. But what do you think of, money as being the end goal or something that they're chasing after?
Yeah, so people can articulate their goal as money, but if they misunderstand that money is just a scorekeep and it doesn't mean anything to your ethics, your values, and what you're going for, then it is cringeworthy, because somebody could compromise their ethics to chase a dollar and cause legal action or criminal action in a company because they lie. Like, look at Theranos. Right?
Yeah.
Theranos, what they were chasing money, clearly, and milked a lot of people out of a billions. That's just wrong. And so,
no, absolutely.
It's money. Saying I'm going to build or exit when I get to this point, that's sound financial planning, but it has nothing to do with what success looks like.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Philip, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciated your time and the fantastic advice that you gave to our founders and all of the listeners out there. So thank you so much. Let's continue the conversation, and hopefully we can work together in the future.
Certainly, and if they want to get involved, connected with me, they can have a discovery call. They can go to Philip Topham youcanbook.me, and I'll give you that so you can have that in the show notes as well, and we can do a discovery call.
Absolutely. We'll put that link in the description, as well as the link for the Savvy Founder and the podcast in the description as well. So this way that people can connect with you directly and listen to all of the fantastic 21 episodes that you have so far. And number 22, we're looking forward to that coming out soon, right?
Yes, absolutely. Tuesday,
fantastic.
9 a.m. 9 a.m. Pacific time, 6 a.m. Eastern time.
Perfect. Okay, so we'll look for that coming out soon. Thank you so much, Philip.
You're welcome. Take care. Cheers.